The next morning, I was up early as usual, eating cereal and a powdered milk drink, watching the camera feeds, and listening to the morning ham news radio. All bad news, while petting Peaches, our cat, when I noticed on a camera feed a cigarette burning across the street to our north, just slightly above the brick wall where the last holdout had set up his base camp. I gave all three of us pet names. We were the compound, across the street was the last holdout, and the group in the apartments the fortress. He'd always been so careful about movement and light leakage. We only knew they were there because of our infrared cameras. He must want to talk, and I obliged him once Edie and I were set up to cover. It took half an hour to think of a plan to keep everyone safe from our closest neighbor. I wore the best bulletproof armor we had, under a trench coat with a fully automatic M4 rifle concealed. Edie would be to the house 60 feet to my west, hunkered down behind steel, dirt, and bricks, and ready to rain death on anyone who needed it. Because of the nuclear winter gloom and constant low light now, she would use her night vision goggles and carry her favorite scoped AR-10 rifle. The 308 round it fired is much larger caliber than I carry under my coat, but I felt the big AR-10 was too unwieldy and to safely use quickly from concealment while wearing 30 pounds of bulletproof armor. From a fixed firing line, the 308 was perfect because it also was able to penetrate light armor and regular brick easily. The wife, normally not a worrier, thought it was a big risk to contact them outright. She only let up once Gus took up the far corner of our to our east with a 37mm grenade launcher. Our most powerful and portable weapon, he could level the last holdout and the surrounding buildings easily. I went to the north wall and lit a match, instantly extinguished it, and waited. I haven't smoked in 42 years, so I'm not about to start up again now. 10 seconds later, a man poked his head out and introduced himself like we'd met at a barbecue. I think I'm going to like this guy. He said his name was Doug, and he asked, I was curious what you were going to do with that gate you stole last night. I was honest and said, we need to close the entrance to our compound. It's a huge hole anyone could drive through. The gate will fix it. Doug agreed it was a smart move. He went on, I love your wall of cars. That's a smart way to keep the riffraff out. As he talked way too much, I could tell he was ex-military, in his 40s, and Doug knew what he was doing, and he had obviously prepped for the worst, like we had. I asked him, do you have any idea how to protect ourselves from aerial surveillance or attack? Doug said, not a clue. I'll have to think about it, but for now we will have to rely on luck and automatic fire to keep us safe from drones and spotter planes. I agreed with him, and I said it was time to go. I asked him not to waste matches or cigs on future signals that gave off too much heat and could be spotted from a half a mile or more. I told him to shine a red light on my current location and we'd see it and answer as quickly as possible. He nodded in agreement as he slipped behind the wall. It was my lone piece of advice to Doug, and we parted ways. Both of us sat there behind our brick walls for a few minutes waiting for the other one to do something stupid. Infrared cameras told me he smoked too much, but I figured, just like he must have, we're probably not going to be alive long enough to care. Edie and I debriefed in the bunker. She said she'd seen lots of activity on the second floor of the house behind Doug. 6 to 10 people, at least, and multiple houses were occupied. She also spotted their sniper, 3 houses to the west, when an attic vent on the brown two-story house was opened while she was watching. Edie said whoever it was is heat shielded and well hidden and protected. For a minute she doubted what she saw, but it was confirmed when the vent closed, when both of you went back behind your walls. The last holdout had at least one person besides Doug who was well trained and ready to fight. From the concealed vantage point, a shooter could control the whole north side of the compound or the whole street between us in both directions for 500 meters. If he used a good silencer, he could get off multiple shots before he had to move. If he was really smart, he'd have a place to move to before he fired again. Even with the silencer, he'd be spotted by a pro, who would be forced to retreat and he'd be forced to retreat under fire. Adding a tall sandbag nest would be what I would do if I had a hidden and protected vantage point and a good shooter to use it. I put the boys to work building a pillbox for the grenade launcher. We only had two of the launchers, and one of them could level every house facing the street between us, if need be. But it would not be fast or effective if at least one of the two launchers were not pre-positioned and well hidden. A pillbox made perfect sense. It worried us a little that a well-armed group of strangers was across the street, but it should worry them as much as us. So it was a standoff, and everyone would have to be fine with that. Now we had the two main points of entry secured, we needed reinforcements. More dogs would solve our immediate manpower problem. It had only been a little over a month since the burn, so most of the dogs should still be alive and friendly towards humans. Using canned dog food as bait, we would set up a large humane animal trap, thanks Abandoned PetSmart, in the local parks off the main roads. 10 traps set and 6 dogs caught in one night. It was enough for a good start. We took them home and fed them as much as they could eat, and we barricaded them in the yard with a shed and blankets for the night. In the morning, we fed them again and talked sweetly to them. 5 of the 6 were grateful and happy to have for the food, but the big Malamute only ate when we walked away, and even then he kept a wary eye on us as he scarfed his food down. One at a time, we introduced them to our 5 dogs. No issues at all as long as treats and kind words were given. We knew would get better with time. The big Malamute was let go after a few days. He was too skittish to trust. We fed him again as he left, and he took off but didn't go far. So I kept feeding him every day outside the gate. I think he wanted us to trust him as much as we wanted to help him. But about a week later, he was sleeping on the ground near where I would feed him each morning, and I opened the gate enough for him to see the bowl of food I had at my feet. He walked in and started eating. The Malamute was as faithful and sweet as any pup I'd ever had before. He was never really a pet, more of a guard dog who just wanted food and a warm bed. But he could patrol like he was born to it. He looked to be less than a year old and would quickly become the lead dog in our canine guard unit. Almost 6 weeks after the burn, we spotted what I needed with a drone, a fully intact armored car. Someone had stolen it, looted it, and left it high-centered on a short concrete wall in the middle of a bad neighborhood off of Bruce Street near downtown Las Vegas. We snuck into the area at night using one of our very quiet electric trucks, and we put the drone up from our hidden location a block away using an abandoned murder scene. We watched the armored truck and learned its patterns of the very few people still living by. The room we were set up in had 4 bodies in bad shape, and they stunk. We used Vicks Vapor in our nose to keep the smell at bay. I figured the neighbors all knew about it and would not come in to steal anything with bloated carcasses lying around. It was a very good spot to watch a truck from. We waited and we learned. It was decided the boys were going to create a diversion a block away from the armored car I wanted so badly. A small smoky fire and some fireworks would be more than enough to draw attention from anybody nearby. A few days before this, we borrowed a 5-ton tow truck and practiced with it a few times before we got in place for the steal. As soon as the fireworks started, we'd go. The timer on the homemade smoke bomb/fireworks was a minute late, but it was still okay. The small bangs and smoke drew very little attention, according to the drone. I shut the old laptop I used to monitor the area from above, and we went for it. I climbed in and drove the massive tow truck backwards, and the boys hopped out when it had barely stopped. They were young and reckless, but it worked in our favor this time. They hooked up the chains to the axle, and I gave a wave as a signal to go. I slowly pulled the armored car off the short wall, and David jumped in with me while Gus jumped into the open cab of the other vehicle with a bag of tools to break the steering wheel column so we could safely tow it home. Shots rang out as the armored car's front axle hit the ground. Someone was shooting at us. I ducked down to grab my rifle, but David and Gus were faster. Fully automatic gunfire rang out from the boys' AR-10s. The sound was deafening, but it was effective fire. Both of them were shooting at the same house across the street. They gave it a new look, Swiss cheese. I floored it, and their barrage only stopped when I turned a corner a few seconds later. I pulled into an alley to check on Gus. He was reloaded and breathless, but he looked fine. The 20 rounds of empty .308 brass hit the ground as I opened the floor, making a bright pinging sound, much nicer than the racket a minute ago. My hearing was still shot, but I surmised from Gus's hand signals he was fine and wanted to get moving. I agreed, and David hopped in with his brother, and I hit the side streets, pulling the armored car behind me. We were pumped up on adrenaline from the brief gunfight, but luckily there was no one pursuing us. A few minutes later, the adrenaline stopped, and I got tired and a little shaky, but pressed on to get home. Just to be safe, we never used the same path twice, if it could be helped, and I checked the drone camera during the brief stop, and it showed no new roadblocks on the way home. As we turned the last corner, Edie was watching the compound cameras and signaled our return. Steve opened the big gate enough for us to slip in. He closed it, put the large iron brace to stop most vehicles from crashing through, and he ran to his sons, ignoring me. Edie wasn't far behind, sprinting across the road to them, while the wife stood on the corner with her Benelli shotgun, guarding them during the big family hug in the middle of the street. My wife was always ready and alert, and I loved her for it. Our first two missions had gone perfectly, with a new gate to keep people out and a new armored truck to retrieve our daughter and her family. We were going in the right direction. Hopefully, we'd get some information on Steve and Edie's missing daughter, too. If we found out where Molly was held, we'd get her back or else. We could also relax a little with 11 dogs patrolling and watching our perimeter now. It seemed like we had a fighting chance against gangs and marauders. All we needed now were more people and bigger guns, and the first one I was about to solve. In the morning, we took a good look at the old Brinks armored car we acquired. The big block diesel was undamaged. The truck needs a new battery and some fuel, and it should start. We also do a full fluid exchange just to be safe. The undercarriage was thoroughly inspected, and the steel skid plates had saved it from any damage from the concrete wall. We drive it as much as possible before we attempted to rescue anyone. No need to risk getting stuck out in the middle of nowhere in hostile territory with a disabled truck. We painted the whole truck flat black, stripped out the money lockers to add more room for ammo and medical supplies, and we used pop rivets to set up slings as chairs at each built-in firing port. Snap-in gun racks were set up by each sling to hold the rifles securely when not in use. We checked, and the truck had a run-flat tires, along with 3 inches of bulletproof glass in the front and sides. This thing could be hit multiple times by gunfire and still work fine. We called it the Beast for good measure. We would not stop or sleep for the whole trip. It was only 250 miles or so round trip to southern Utah, but with dead vehicles and unknown road conditions, we really did not know what our timeline was. We brought a camping pad for Julia and her family, and they'd be exhausted and could rest while we rushed home. The truck could hold 4 people for 2 days with gear, water, supplies easily. Adding 3 more would not be bad at all. When we come under fire, everyone could shoot back from a firing port. The Beast was the perfect truck for the job. We grabbed a chemical toilet, food, water, a med kit, guns, lots of guns and ammo. With 2 people in the front and 2 in the back, we were almost ready. We'd also cut a door between the cab and the rear so we could trade out positions without stopping. All we needed to do now was figure out how badly a truck this does on fuel economy. Diesel fuel was heavy, and it would not stop at any gas station along the way. We had to carry what we needed. The truck's gas tank held 75 gallons, and it got an estimated 8 miles to the gallon, or about 600 miles to a tank of fuel. We decided to add additional 75 gallons would be more than enough to spare fuel for the 250-mile round trip. It gives us 4 times what we needed, and we thought it was a good margin for error for the unknown conditions. At the last minute, we decided to take all 3 working drones. We needed them to ensure a stealthy trip and to find decent roads. David packed enough drone batteries to last twice as long as this trip would take. With electronic sensors and the dogs as protection, Steve and Edie would be fine and have plenty of warning if something happened. They could quickly get in the bunker and hunker down, waiting for our return. Yes, the wife was coming on this trip. It's her daughter and her grandchild out there in danger, and no one could stop her, nor would they even try. She'd ride in the back, manning the 37mm grenade launcher and an M4 serious firepower we'd need for sure. Before all this happened, I had to drag her to the range to practice, and now she won't go anywhere without a pistol and a Benelli shotgun. She learns fast and is fearless. I'm lucky, man, to have her along for the ride. We're going to get shot at a lot, and hanging 15 5-gallon cans of fuel outside unprotected is out of the question. The roof seemed strong enough to hold, so we decided to weld an armored box on the top and secure to the top to secure and protect the fuel cans. We were careful to avoid covering the escape hatch above the driver's cab. We'd used the armor on the forklift to build the bulletproof rack we needed. All this added 2,000 pounds to an already lumbering 20,000-pound armored car, excuse me. Ham operators came through in a big way for us. With only a few major antennas still functioning nationwide, the handheld and mobile operators were all doing the heavy lifting for the radio system now. Even fewer of those had secure encrypted communication capacities. The governments around the world hated private secure communications and passed laws to stop it. They had equipment to track our secure transmissions, and when they could find transmissions they could find. The spy agencies really wanted to know every word, every conversation spoken, and they went to great lengths to shut down private and encrypted networks. But no one was around anymore to care what we said or who transmitted it or where it was coming from, we hoped. Julia still had the small handheld ham radio I gave her when she moved to Colorado. I think she wanted something else as a gift. I insisted, and for once she listened. She even had the little hand crank generator accompanying it. The little generator could charge the radios and a few small flashlights indefinitely. Julia's radio only had a short transmission range, but it also had 512-bit encryption. Anyone with the proper encryption key could talk to her securely if they were less than 10 miles away, or longer with a good line of sight, or a radio repeater could extend the range. I sent the encryption key to the ham operator who lives in East Las Vegas I'd known for decades. From his bunker under his double-wide mobile home, Crazy Joe could run our search for the missing kids. I believed in his judgment to only transmit the encryption key to trusted radio operators, and it worked. And now we had a repeater relay set between Julia and the compound. She had made it to Cedar City, Utah on stolen ATVs using the back roads on a forestry trail out of Colorado and the Rocky Mountains. When the ATVs broke down, they walked southwest, avoiding the main roads and heading to St. George, putting them 115 miles away or twice the distance on the back roads. Julia thinks they'll be on the north side of that city in 48 hours. With the beast ready and the crew packing the last of our gear, we timed our departure to get Julia at nearly the same time she would arrive on foot. We headed out at midnight to make a 6 a.m. rendezvous. It was August 1st, 2050, and we were going to reunite with our daughter, even if it killed us. Getting out of the tiny city was straightforward, but we took some small arms fire when we neared the 215 interchange to the I-15 north. The old Army Reserve Station must have been overrun, and the new occupants were attempting to own the interchange. We ignored them. Drones were up, 2 in front, 1 trailing behind to watch for pursuit, and we were radio silent to avoid detection. No electronics were used except for the drones. This close to home, failure meant Steve and Edie could still come to our aid if needed, but we didn't want to think about it. Running completely dark, no lights, no radios, I was driving with night vision goggles over my glasses. It wasn't comfortable, but necessary. I could see perfectly well with the light snow packing the road and giving everything a bright glow. Getting around the frequently stalled or wrecked cars was a breeze. We were lucky no one thought to rig an explosive device like they used in the War on Terror to stop cars. When we got to Mesquite, Arizona, it was deserted. The rest of the small towns along the way looked burned out or abandoned, and it made the trip easier, but it was depressing to see the devastation. The day of rage had spread out this far, more than 60 miles from Las Vegas. 4 hours later, we were on the southern outskirts of St. George. I took Highway 7 east to avoid driving in the center of town. We'd make a great big boxy target, so the long detour was worth it. We planned a Harrisburg pickup on the north side of St. George, but the drone showed a lot of vehicles blocking the road. So I cut off onto the dirt road, and it took us to the old golf course. And it was a quick drive across the snowy links to get to Harrisburg. The Virgin River was very low, muddy and icy, but proved easy enough to cross. Even wearing tight night vision goggles, I spotted the shirt way up in the tall tree where we were approaching the field just south of the pickup area. Julia grew up hearing my high school stories about camping in the desert outside Phoenix, My group of friends used to get lost frequently, and we learned to mark our campsite with a rag high in a tree or a cactus. From a distance, it looked like trash, and it was always ignored by others. But in reality, it was there to help us find the camp without using our phones or making a lot of racket. I was sure she'd use my old trick to mark her location, and I was right. After a 6-hour drive, we were finally hugging our daughter. She was filthy, smelly, and ready to collapse, but she was safe again. Nick Jr. was much taller than we'd seen him a year ago, equally dirty and smiling from ear to ear. Nick Sr. had the start of a nice beard, and he was even thinner than I remember. The wife was overjoyed. She eventually had to hand me her shotgun so it would stop swinging around smacking everybody, and she held them in her iron hug. No one cared about the dirt or the grime. We were just thrilled to be reunited and whole again. The boys had their The boys said their hellos, but knew the routine and started refueling the truck and checking for damage. We'd also swapped out the batteries in the drones one at a time. We'd driven 205 miles with detours and burned nearly 32 gallons of fuel. Abysmal gas mileage, to say the least, but the truck was mechanically sound, and in 15 minutes we were refueled on the road again. I sent a half-second coded pulse to notify Steve and Edie of successful rescue, and they replied with the 00Z code. It meant turn on your secure comms in 30 minutes. A mystery, but not an emergency. Before we left, Steve and I worked out 24 short codes. Each of us had a copy to decipher the messages. I set my timer on my G-Shock and went back to hugging everyone before climbing in the back of the beast. I gave each of our passengers a large water bottle and a bag of beef jerky and granola bars. They would be dehydrated and starving. Julius said, I'm impressed. I never thought the day would come when all of your insanity about prepping for the end of the world would be needed, but I'm thrilled with it now. I said, told you. Once inside, Gus drove with David in the passenger seat so the rest of us could ride in the back and talk about the last 6 weeks. Nick Jr. was asleep before we hit the street. As the drones flew cover for us, I gave the new arrivals a quick tour of the truck, the ammo storage, the firing ports, and also explained how the beast was set up for a long and bulletproof trip. We were not going to stop unless it was an emergency. As I said this, I pointed to the freshly emptied chemical toilet with a bungee cord secured it in place to prevent spills. One of the boys had dumped it while the other refueled the beast. We played catch-up, and before I knew it, my watch alarm sounded, and I turned the encrypted radio on and listened to Steve speak excitedly. The ham operator had triangulated Molly's location. She was being held in Flagstaff, Arizona, at the interchange of the I-17 and the I-40 near the back of the super wall zone there. Amazon bought Walmart 20 years ago and gave the stores the new stupid name. The public was widely referred to it as War Zone because they were all in terrible neighborhoods and the crime was rampant. It would be a real, true war zone now. It was over 250 miles by the back roads to Flagstaff, 150 miles if we took the main roads. Our best estimate was we'd have enough diesel to get there and most of the way back to Vegas, but we ran out of fuel near Kingman, Arizona. I said we could stop at the backup bunker east of Williams and refuel and refill our water and ammo supplies. Everyone nodded in agreement. It was worth the risk, so we told Steve we'd head to Flagstaff immediately. We'll get there as fast as we can, I said. I could hear Edie. I could hear Edie. I could hear Edie in the background squealing with joy. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We scheduled another secure call for an hour. With the extra passengers manning guns, it seemed like we had a decent chance to safely do a rescue in the city. I got back on the secure ham radio and asked for the best clear run to downtown Flagstaff. The radio operator who answered was part of the relay team who found Molly's location. He was a few hundred miles north of Flagstaff and had helped with the pinpoint accuracy. He'd get back to us in 30 minutes with an update. All of us had driven through Flagstaff many times. A few of us had shopped at that wall zone during our travels. It was a huge store with a massive parking lot. The drones would give us more information when we got closer, but I seem to remember a thick tree line near the back of the store. I hoped it was still there. Whoever had taken up the store had enough food and water to hold out a year with a small army. We'd know soon enough what we were facing, either a well-armed group or a bunch of crackheads with guns. We didn't really know which was better, but we'd find out tonight. 30 minutes were up. An encrypted ham radio was turned on. It came to life, and the operator said he had a good route in, but the bad news was the group at Walzone was at least 25 strong and fully entrenched. They were kidnapping any girls they could find and running a scam on the parents to steal everything they had. It appeared they'd been doing it for at least 2 weeks. If any of the girls' parents were already dead, they'd be shipped south to Old Mexico and traded to the cartel for drugs. Radio traffic in the area suggested the group was not well versed in secure communications, and they were openly talking about trades and laughing about helping people find their lost kids. Sickening. When the second alarm went off on my watch, I knew it was time to give Stephen Eady an update. Using the encrypted radio, but still not talking in plain English, I briefed them on the plan and would update them when it was over. I said Alpha Sierra Romeo Foxtrot out. Translates to all secure, route found, radio silence. I turned off the radio before they had a chance to answer, not wanting advice or comment. If they had an emergency, Stephen Eady could send a coded message, and I'd get it when it was during my hourly check-in. Based on advice from the ham operators, we decided to take State Highway 89A east and head south on the 89. When we got close, we'd set up an observation post at the Flagstaff DMV, a quarter mile north of the store. We could move when we were sure it was safe. Once we were securely hidden at the DMV, we could survey the store and surrounding areas for as long as possible. Getting there took 5 hours, but we were secure, hidden, and ready. The boys refueled the beast and waited with AR-10s at the ready. The boys were holding up well and never let on how worried they must be about their big sister. Working construction for all those years really taught them to listen, and their mom and dad taught them to be tough. We were only 6 weeks into the worldwide apocalypse, and so far, so good. The drones showed lots of people coming and going through the loading dock, and no one near the tree line to the east. Snowfall had been heavy here, so we'd have to be careful of hidden items buried in the snow as we approached. We took the drones in low, and the camera showed hundreds of shopping carts covered in snow, clogging the entrances in the front and back. Stacked too high, a wall of carts would be hard to get around quickly without making a lot of noise. The big building appeared to have working lights on the perimeter, but only the rear dock area was well lit. The gang must have rigged up a generator to help with security and lights. The loading dock was clear of carts, but guarded by at least 4 armed men. It was our only quick way in. If we hit the east wall with a 37mm grenade, it would cause a huge commotion, and many of the guards would come running. We could drive up to the rear of the store during the confusion and commotion with the beast and kill anyone left with our silenced handguns. At that point, the real problem started, finding Molly in the massive store. We needed more intel than the drones could give us. A place so big would need more than 24 guards to hold, so the gangs could be recruiting for the job, I hoped. I could dress up like a bum and push a cart full of junk as I asked for work. When I got close, I could maybe see inside the loading dock and get an idea of what was going on in the loading bay. I had to try. An hour later, no one shot me as I very slowly approached, pushing a squeaky-wheeled shopping cart full of scrap metal and boxes. Walking slowly, I was looking for obstructions poking out of the snow in the road. Spikes or curbs could slow the beast down, but I saw none on the road. As I got closer, I sounded weak and desperate as I asked for work. The guard told me to get lost as he pointed a rifle at me. At first, he wanted to see what was in my cart. I let him steal it, and I fell to the ground as if I'd been pushed. The loading dock doors opened slowly, and more lights seemed to come on automatically as it opened. A large man with a holstered firearm yelled, "Get that bum out of here." Inside the door in the demolished dock area, I could see the corner of a tall chain-link fence set up on inside of the main loading room floor. They had the women in a large cage by the roll-up door. I got up and scrambled away with a new reason to limp for real, and moved into the darkness before someone decided to kill me. We had enough fuel to assault the building immediately. We moved the beast to the abandoned gas station a block north of the wall zone, and Nick Sr. prepped a barely running car to act as a fake getaway vehicle. At 11 p.m., the grenade went off with a satisfying bang, and as the guards came running, Nick let the prepped car run at full speed with a brick on the accelerator with no one in it. It would eventually crash at the end of the parking lot, and nearly 20 guards shooting at it, according to the drone footage. Their headlamps and flashlights and the snow helped to illuminate the carnage they caused, to an empty car. Running dark, the beast came barreling around the corner and skidded to a stop as everyone except Nick Jr. jumped in. He was manning the passenger side front door, jumped out. He was manning the passenger side door with an M4 pointing at the out the firing port. He said he was ready to shoot anyone who came around the far corner. No exceptions. Everyone gets a bullet, I told him. He nodded. I wasn't sure he could do it, but I hoped we wouldn't have to find out right there. With guns at the ready, we moved as a team towards the loading dock roll-up door, shooting out lights and silenced handguns as we went. A door I did not see before slammed open loudly, and I killed the big man with a bullet to his face as he came around out with his pistol drawn. My silence clock was whisper quiet. He never got off a shot before he was dead. We met no other resistance for a full minute while we yelled for Molly as the door finished rolling up. Molly screamed back, "I'm here." Gus had a sledgehammer with him to smash locks, and on the first hit, the chain holding the cage fell away. Molly was zip-tied, so her brother David cut her loose, getting a kiss and a thank you. David handed her a loaded Benelli shotgun, and she took his Bowie knife without asking and put it in her waistband. The girl liked her knives. 8 other captives were screaming to be let go, and we cut them all loose quickly. A few ran out the door and were gunned down by arriving guards. Nick Jr. let loose with a full automatic stream of fire, and it went 10 feet over their head, but still stopped the guards in their tracks and made them slide in the snow and ice as they retreated looking for cover. We'd practiced before the burn, and now it was the real thing. In full gear, vests and helmets, 4 of us, me, Gus, Julia, hit them all at once with everything we had, while the wife showered the hallway behind us with 12-gauge buckshot to stop anyone from coming from the store or the warehouse. A simple five-man team movement was taught to the military and SWAT teams everywhere because it works. At least 4 of the gang fell to our coordinated fire. When met with resistance or force, the best response is overwhelming superior firepower. The remaining girls hit the floor during the brief gunfight, and a few got up and followed us outside as we tactically entered the beast, 2 at a time. Those on the ground providing cover, fire as we went. Molly started pulling all the remaining girls in the truck with us, and no one argued. It was going to be crowded, standing room only ride home. David slipped into the front cab using the rough cut hole to get in the front seat, and he drove off with me hanging on the open door while we were still taking fire. We got it closed, and we picked up Nick Sr. in the tree line east of the store where he had launched the grenade from. For good measure, Nick put a half a dozen rounds on the roof, hoping to burn the whole damn thing down. He did. The radio reported a huge fire at the Flagstaff war zone a day later. We were silent as Gus monitored the drones and David drove the side streets, first north and eventually southwest towards home. The rescue lasted 6 minutes, a minute longer than we wanted, but it worked perfectly. The beast performed like a champ and all of us made it out alive. Now we had Molly and 4 extra passengers. I sat there in a seat sling, drinking water and preparing to send a message to Stephen Eady about Molly when Nick Jr. noticed blood on the floor. Everyone did a quick body check looking for wounds. When you're shot during an adrenaline rush, you don't feel it for a few minutes. A man can do a lot in a few minutes. As I prepped the message to the compound of our success, my adrenaline was running out, and I slumped over with 2 bullet holes in my right side below my bulletproof vest. I was unconscious for a few hours, only coming to as we drove down the I-17, driving down 17 miles of bad road to the backup bunker. Every bump burned like hell. I cursed like I was a young man again and eventually passed out, I think. I was lucky one of the new passengers was an ER trauma nurse. Ashley was caught by the gangs on the same day as Molly, and they'd become friends in the captivity. It was we had an advanced med kit, but only I really knew how to use it all, so she saved my life. I would offer her a spot in the compound when we stopped for fuel, water, and ammo. The trailer looked the same as it had been when I'd seen it last year. It was terrible. A few of us knew where the fuel and water were buried, and I told the others where to start digging with their bare hands and the few tools we had possessed. I reminded the wife to check the little shed in back. There might still be something useful in it. She came back with 2 old rusty shovels, and the digging went much faster. From my vantage point in the cab of the beast, I was awake now and pulling overwatch duty with the drones up and circling high above. It was all I could do while injured, taped up, and with an IV in my arm. I noticed that two of the new girls were not doing their share of digging. They didn't seem injured or shell-shocked from captivity, but they also didn't appear interested in helping out. I'd give them a chance to turn it around and get it together, or we'd leave them in a larger group I know of west of Kingman. Honest Mormons who were prepared for the rapture, who were better prepared for the rapture than anyone in all the Southwest. They would take good care of them without question. The last girl, Maria, was a very tiny but strong worker, and it seemed dirt and grime did not bother her. She'd grabbed a rifle when she jumped into Beast back in Flagstaff, and I ready to fight. I put my hand on the barrel of the gun and asked her for it. Uh, and I said to hang on while we continued to race away from the war zone. I didn't know her and didn't want a stranger to have a rifle in the truck. As I watched the group work, I noticed David looking at Ashley and Gus talking to Maria and handing her his water. It seemed the boys liked these two girls, and if it worked out, we'd have even a larger fighting force. With the drones up watching all the approaches, I felt like we could take an hour and train these new ones in the group on firearms safety and operations, and show them a simple fire team movement, just the basics for now. I moved carefully so as not to break any of Ashley's fine needlework on my side. It was painful but bearable. I also didn't want to slip and fall in the snow. If fall would be very bad for my injuries. Our supplies of meds were finite, but a year from now, when everything would be expired, it'd be a different story. Eventually, I would enjoy the ride home with a few painkillers to make me sleep. When we were refueled and restocked and ate something, I had Molly, Nick Jr., Molly, Ashley, and Maria follow me to the heavily wooded gully south of the trailer. Molly and I carried standard issue M4s and a Benelli shotgun, and our sidearms, my Glock, and Molly was wearing a Beretta her brother Gus had brought for her. Molly and Julia also had Smith & Wesson 38s in their front pockets. While still in the truck, I had Gus get the pistols out from under the seat and give them both a pocket revolver. The big Bowie knife Molly took from her little brother was now in a proper sheath. I'm sure David didn't give it up without at least a sour look. I think we're going to call that right there, folks. It's a really good stopping point. All right. I'll see you tomorrow.